Hello everyone and welcome to my spoiler talk for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. As always, and it kind of goes without saying that this video is going to be filled with spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie and you don't want to know anything about it, you came to the wrong place, buddy. But if you have seen it or you're not really that bothered, then please stick around. But just before I start, I do need to let you know that this is not going to be a video where I go through absolutely every single thing that goes on in this movie. I'm not going to do like a full breakdown of the entire movie. This video is mostly going to be me talking about the stuff that I wanted to talk about in my spoiler-free review, as well as a few thoughts that I had on the overall direction that they could have gone with this movie. So let's begin. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about in this video is Mutt, Indiana Jones' son from Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, played by Shia LaBeouf. He doesn't appear in this movie, and I didn't think that he would, and people had been speculating as to how he would either be written out or acknowledged, and I don't think that this is what people imagined. We find out during a conversation between Indy and Helena that Mutt joined the army and was killed in battle, and that his death puts a big strain on both Indy and Marion's marriage, and that's why they ultimately broke up. I do think that this is a good scene overall. I do think that the way that it's handled and the way that it's written, I do think is really good, because you do get to see a different side to Indiana Jones that we've never really seen before, and it also gives Harrison Ford the chance to do something a little bit different with his performance. They even do a bit more with that later on when Antonio Banderas' character is killed off. But I'm going to be honest, I don't really know how to feel about it overall, because it does feel a little bit out of character for Mutt. And I also think that most fans would have liked to have seen Indiana Jones and Marion still be together as a happily married couple, because this does seem to be a really weird running thing to do within Hollywood, where you introduce a character, there's a lot of chemistry between them, they build up the romance between these lead characters across the movie, they get together by the end, it's all happy and nice, but then by the sequel they've been through a load of problems, they've broken up, and then the whole movie is them learning to get back together, and it's just, you don't need to constantly do that. This has even happened with Indiana Jones and Marion, because they did get together at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but then within the time between Raiders and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, they broke up, and then Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is them meeting again and getting back together, and then ultimately getting there happily ever after and then getting married. So why did they feel the need to do it again? Karen Allen does return as Marion in this, and they did flat out reveal that right before the film was released, but it's only the one scene right towards the end of the film. I will admit it is a nice moment, and they do reenact that scene from Raiders where they're together on the boat, but that's really it. And Indiana Jones is still wanted for murder, because that's something that they bring up and then just never address ever again. I really can't help but think that they should have gone a different direction with the Mutt stuff overall and have it tie a bit more into the story in some way. But I think how the story ends with Indy retiring with Marion is a nice place to end, and it is pretty much what I would have had them do. I said in my spoiler-free review that one thing that I would have changed with this movie is the reasoning behind why it is that Indiana Jones goes on this big adventure for the Dial of Destiny with Helena. But one thing I would have changed is still have Indy and Marion be a married couple. I would have changed it so that Indiana Jones is desperate to get back out there, get back on another adventure and just relive the old glory days. But over the course of the movie, Indy slowly starts to realise what's most important to him, and by the end of the movie he's had his fill of adventures and he wants to hang up his hat and whip for good, and he wants to settle down with Marion. The other big thing that I would have changed is who Indiana Jones is partnered up with. Helena could have been a really great character, and there is a lot of potential for what it is that they could have done with her, but I feel like the direction that they did go with her within the movie does make that a little bit difficult. I would have gone back into Indiana Jones's history, and I would have brought back an older character who audiences already know and are invested in, and that character is Short Round. Ke Huy Quan has been making a bit of a return to acting with things like Everything Everywhere All at Once and the upcoming second season of Loki, and I'm really sure that fans of Indiana Jones would have been more than happy to have seen him return as Short Round. I think that having Indy and Short Round having a similar dynamic to what Indy has with his father in The Last Crusade could have been a really fun idea, and it gives us a chance to see how both characters have changed over the years. And then the option would be there for Lucasfilm to either continue the franchise with Short Round as the lead protagonist, or call it time on the franchise altogether. And I feel like with the film as it is, the dynamic between him and Short Round would have been much better considering where Indy is at this point in his life and everything that happened with Mutt. There was a bit of me that was genuinely convinced that Short Round might actually make an appearance in this movie, and there is a bit where just before they meet Antonio Banderas that they mentioned that Indy has a contact who has a boat, and that's who I thought that they were meeting. But when it comes to the rest of the movie, I did have a few theories surrounding what it is that the Dial of Destiny does, Archimedes Dial as it is known in this movie. I had a few theories around what its abilities were going to be, and I was pretty spot on. I had a guess that this movie was going to involve time travel in some way, and it was purely based on what we were seeing in a lot of the trailers. A lot of the dialogue seemed to hint at what it is that the dial was able to do, as well as a few of the shots that they were showing of the planes going through the clouds, and it looked like there was this weird white void, almost like a big time vortex like you'd see in Doctor Who. So that's what made me think that that's where the movie was going. Essentially what the dial does in this movie is it reveals the location of fissures in time, and these fissures allow someone to travel to another point in time, and that's why Jürgen Voller, played by Mads Mikkelsen, is after it. Jürgen was a member of the Nazi party, and he fully believes that he could do what Hitler couldn't, and wants to go back in time to replace him as Führer and do things better. It is a really interesting idea, and it does make sense when you see what it is that Jürgen Voller has been going through over the years and how he's been treated. But as I said, that is the most interesting thing about his character. I also said in my spoiler-free review that I don't necessarily see why it is that the movie needed to take place in 1969 around the time of the moon landings, apart from one bit, and that's really it, and that bit is because Jürgen worked on Apollo 11. But that's it, and that's the only reason why that is even included in this. But one positive that I will say is that I think that the build up towards the actual time travel scene, when they are actually about to go through the fissure, I do think that the build up to it is actually pretty good, because you've got Indy, who has been shot, he's been wounded, he potentially is dying, and he's been captured and taken aboard Jürgen's plane, and they are travelling towards this fissure. But you've got Helena and Teddy in hot pursuit behind them, and Jürgen is convinced that they are going to go back to the 1930s, and that is where the fissure is going to lead them. But because of shenanigans that I really do not understand, to be completely honest, they don't end up in the 1930s, they end up in a completely different time altogether. Instead, they end up at the Siege of Syracuse in 212 BC. And despite the fact that I did say that this movie doesn't really set up the time travel aspect as well as it really could have, I do think that there are enough little hints about where it is that they are going to go, because they do mention it earlier on in the movie, and there is a sequence where they do sort of show a puppet show that does actually feature that sequence. I will admit, I do think that it is a pretty fun sequence overall, but in terms of it being an Indiana Jones movie, I do think that this is an odd direction for it to take. I said in my spoiler-free review that I was really curious how it was that people were going to react to this aspect being introduced into this movie, especially considering how people reacted to the alien in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And when I did start looking into it, I did see that there was a very mixed reaction to it online. I know that the Indiana Jones movies and games do dabble in fantasy and myths and legends, but they never veered too much into sci-fi territory, and when Crystal Skull and now this did, it almost turns them into completely different movies, and that to me is why it feels odd. And I didn't think I would ever say this, but Indiana Jones is now a time traveller. There are times in the movie where they do discuss maybe being able to go back in time and being able to change things if they wanted to, and that's where we get the info about Mutt. But there isn't really any proper setup for it. At least with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, you do see one of the aliens really early on, so to me it isn't too jarring later. But as I said, as it is on its own, I do think that it is a pretty fun sequence, and I do like that when the soldiers see it and the plane's being hit and it's all on fire and it's flying over them and fire and shooting at them all, that they're all convinced that it's a dragon, and that's what gets referenced during the puppet show during the midway of the movie. So I do like that little reference. And I'll be honest, I do quite like how it is that when Indiana Jones actually sees what's going on around him, that I love his reaction to it, just how he's seeing things, because this is something that he's studied his entire life and he's finally getting to witness it with his own eyes. And I'll also say that this is the scene where him and Helena, I feel like the chemistry between them really does work a lot better. I feel like the connection between them is a lot better and more rounded. This is the point in the movie where I do feel like Helena as a character does improve, and I started to see that potential that they had for her character. But because it's so late on, and because it is such a stark contrast to how she has been with Indiana Jones throughout the rest of the movie, that it does feel a little bit out of character for her. Part of me is glad that Indy does get taken back to the present day, even if it doesn't completely make a lot of sense. But I do think that it could have been a really cool idea to have seen Indy actually stay there in the past. There is a scene earlier on in the movie where they do visit Archimedes' tomb, and they discover that whoever is in this tomb was somebody who has interacted with somebody from the 1960s. And the corpse that they find within the tomb itself is wearing the exact same watch that Indiana Jones is wearing. So I feel like that could have actually been a really cool little twist, and I feel like that would have really played well into the time travel aspect. I also think it could have been a really cool idea to have seen Helena and Teddy returning to the present, and then weeks, months later, they return to Archimedes' tomb, and then they find on the wall a gigantic engraving of Indiana Jones with his hat and everything. And you'd get the chance to see Indiana Jones become an actual legend, like the trailers are building him up to be. I don't know if that would have made the movie any better or not, but that's just an idea I had. But the ending that we do get, Indy gets knocked out by Helena, he wakes up back in his apartment, we get the scene between him and Marion, and then we end on a really nice shot of Indiana Jones' hat being hung up. And that's the end of the Indiana Jones franchise. Or is it? At this point in time, there hasn't been any official word from Lucasfilm or Disney about the potential future of this franchise. There had been rumours about Phoebe Waller-Bridge returning as Helena, now donning the fedora and taking over the franchise, but I'll be honest, I don't know many people who would be on board with that. That being said, the movie does end on a shot of Helena putting on her own hat and going off with Sally and the kids to go and get something to eat before the camera pans up and you see the final shot of Indiana Jones' hat being hung up. That shot to me feels like the setup for a potential spin-off. I might be completely misinterpreting that scene, but this is Disney at the end of the day, so I wouldn't necessarily rule it out. To me, it does seem odd for Lucasfilm to bring back the Indiana Jones franchise for one last film and then never using it ever again, even when this film itself feels pretty unnecessary. I don't think that Lucasfilm wants to solely focus on making Star Wars related content until the end of time, and I think that might be the reason why we initially got the Willow sequel series, where it was meant to take place years later after the Willow movie, but the series didn't seem to resonate with anyone. I'm going to be completely honest, I don't know anybody who actually did watch it, and as far as I know, they aren't going to be making any more content within that world. So that then leaves the Indiana Jones franchise, so I do see them potentially doing something with this franchise in the future. I don't necessarily think it'll be an Indiana Jones related thing, but I think that it is more likely to be a spin-off of some kind with either an established character or somebody who is yet to be introduced. We could even get a sequel to Young Indiana Jones. I do think that a spin-off series is very likely, whether it is Young Indiana Jones related or a spin-off featuring Helena. That's just complete speculation at this point, but I do think, hand on heart, that the direction that they should go with this franchise is create a spin-off that focuses on Short Round. If they have the right story and they have the right people working on it, I think that it not only could work, but it could be a great idea. So we'll see what the future of Lucasfilm holds. Right, well, that is pretty much everything that I wanted to say for this video, so thank you very much for watching. If you do enjoy this content, please like, please subscribe, hit the notification button to keep up to date on everything that is going on here. If you have seen Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, let me know down in the comments what you think about it. As this is a spoiler-filled video, go nuts, let me know exactly what you think about it, what you would change, what you would keep. What are your overall thoughts of this movie? And where would you rank it compared to the other Indiana Jones movies? I'm really curious. Plus, if you have any suggestions for any future Rewind reviews you would like me to do, let me know. Keep an eye out for more content in the future. There's going to be a load more videos on the way of a lot of big movies as well as a lot of Rewind reviews that I'm really looking forward to doing. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Rewind Reviews. See you guys.